The winter of 1883 had been particularly cruel to Ash Hollow, Nebraska. The small frontier town huddled against the endless prairie like a collection of wooden boxes thrown carelessly across the red earth. Dust devils danced between the weathered buildings even in the cold months, and the constant wind carried the taste of alkali and despair. The main street, little more than a wide dirt path rutted by wagon wheels, stretched between two rows of false-fronted establishments that promised more than they delivered. At the center of this desolate collection of humanity stood the Dusty Spur, a saloon that had seen better days when the railroad surveyors first passed through 5 years prior. Its painted sign hung crooked, the letters faded by sun and wind until they were barely legible. Inside, the air hung thick with tobacco smoke, cheap whiskey fumes, and the peculiar mixture of sweat and perfume that marked such establishments across the frontier. Clara May Watson moved through the haze like a ghost made flesh. At 26, she possessed the kind of beauty that had once turned heads in more civilized places: high cheekbones, eyes the color of prairie sky before a storm, and hair like spun wheat that she pinned up in elaborate curls for her performances. But grief had etched fine lines around her eyes, and her smile never quite reached them anymore. She had been in Ash Hollow for 8 months now, ever since they'd brought Jake Watson's body back draped over his horse, 6 bullets in his back from an argument over cards in Dodge City. Jake had been many things: a gambler, a sometime gunfighter with a reputation that preceded him into every town, a man who loved his whiskey more than his wife. But he had also been her husband, and his death had left her stranded in a place where a woman alone had few options. The good women of Ash Hollow, such as they were, had made their position clear from the start. The minister's wife had crossed the street rather than acknowledge her. The general store owner's daughter had spit at her feet. They called her the gunfighter's widow, as if Jake's sins had somehow seeped into her skin. When the money ran out and hunger gnawed at her belly, when the boarding house proprietor demanded payment or departure, Clara had done what she had to do to survive. She danced at the Dusty Spur. Not the kind of dancing that got a woman run out of town. She kept her clothes on, mostly, but enough to draw the eyes of lonely men who paid good money to watch her move to the tinny piano music. Sometimes she sang, her voice carrying the melancholy ballads her mother had taught her back in Missouri, before everything went wrong. The proprietor, a greasy man named Cyrus Webb, paid her just enough to keep a roof over her head and food in her belly, though he made it clear daily that he considered her fortunate to have even that. "You ain't nothing special, Clara May," he'd remind her, counting out her meager wages with reluctant fingers. "Plenty of women would dance for less. Some would do more for less." But Clara had drawn her lines, invisible though they might be to the watching world. She danced, she smiled, she let them look. Nothing more. It was a precarious existence, balanced on the edge of respectability's knife, but it was survival. That night, as February's cold breath rattled the saloon's windows, Clara prepared for another performance. In the small room behind the bar that served as her dressing area, she pinched her cheeks to bring color to them and adjusted the red satin dress that had seen too many washings. The fabric had worn thin in places, but in the dim saloon light, no one would notice. Through the thin walls, she could hear the usual crowd gathering, cowboys in from the ranches, a few townsmen escaping their wives, traveling men with dust on their boots and secrets in their eyes. The piano player, an old man everyone called Professor, though he'd never seen the inside of a school, was warming up with scales that had more missed notes than hit ones. Clara closed her eyes and tried to summon the strength for another night. In her mind, she could still see Jake's face the last morning she'd seen him alive, his dark eyes bloodshot from drink, his hand heavy with the weight of his Colt .45. He'd kissed her roughly, promised to win big in Dodge, promised things would be different when he returned. She'd known he was lying. Jake always lied, but she'd kissed him back anyway. Love was like that sometimes. She'd learned. It made fools of even the wisest women. 5 minutes. Clara May. Cyrus's voice cut through her reverie. She stood, smoothing her dress, and took one last look in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Painted lips, tired eyes. A costume that proclaimed her as exactly what the town believed her to be. But beneath it all, her heart still beat with the stubborn rhythm of survival. She had endured Jake's tempers, his drinking, his infidelities. She had endured his death and the town's judgment. She would endure this too. Meanwhile, 5 miles outside of town, Eli Boone pulled his collar higher against the bitter wind and urged his horse forward. The black gelding, a sturdy mount he'd traded for in Kansas, picked its way carefully along the frozen trail. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising the kind of cold rain that could kill a man caught unprepared on the prairie. Eli had been riding for 3 days, ever since leaving the smoking ruins of what had once been his small ranch near the Platte River. The image was burned into his memory like a brand, the barn reduced to blackened timbers, the house a pile of ash, his few head of cattle shot dead in the field. The Carlson brothers had finally made good on their threats, all over a disputed water claim that Eli had won fair and square in court. But law meant little out here where men made their own justice with fire and lead. At 32, Eli had the weathered look of a man who'd spent more nights under stars than roofs. His face bore the permanent squint of someone always watching the horizon, and his hands, even gloved, showed the calluses of honest work. He'd built that ranch with those hands, raised the walls, strung the fence, gentled the horses. 3 years of blood and sweat, gone in one night while he'd been in town getting supplies. He'd thought about tracking the Carlsons, knew he could find them easy enough. His hand had even strayed to the Winchester in his saddle scabbard more than once. But what was the point? More blood wouldn't bring back what was lost. Instead, he'd gathered what little survived the fire, loaded his horse, and headed east with no particular destination in mind. Maybe Colorado, maybe further, anywhere but here. The lights of Ash Hollow appeared through the gathering gloom like yellow eyes in the darkness. Eli had hoped to make it further before nightfall, but the horse was tired, and the smell of rain grew stronger by the minute. A town meant a warm bed, a hot meal, and shelter from the storm. It also meant people. Questions. The weight of civilization he'd been happy to leave behind, but tonight, comfort outweighed solitude. He rode down the main street, noting the typical collection of businesses: general store, livery stable, hotel, saloon. The few people still out hurried along with their heads down, eager to get inside before the rain began. No one paid him much attention, just another drifter passing through, and Eli preferred it that way. The livery stable was run by a Swedish man with arms like tree trunks who took Eli's horse without comment, though his eyes lingered on the quality of the animal and the worn but well-maintained tack. Eli paid for the night in advance, made sure the black would get extra oats, and gathered his saddlebags and rifle. "Storm coming," the Swede offered in accented English. "Bad one, I think." Eli nodded. "Figured as much. There a hotel in town?" "Ja, but it's full. Cattle buyers in from Chicago." The man spat tobacco juice into the straw. "The saloon got rooms upstairs. Not fancy, but dry." Eli thanked him and stepped back into the street. The first drops of rain had begun to fall, cold and sharp as needles. The dusty Spurs windows glowed with lamplight, and he could hear music and laughter from within. He'd wanted quiet, but any port in a storm. He pushed through the bat-wing doors just as the sky opened up behind him. The warmth hit him first, then the smell, then the noise. The saloon was more crowded than he'd expected for such a small town. Men clustered around tables, playing cards or just drinking. The bar ran along one side, tended by a sweating man with pomaded hair who looked like he'd sampled too much of his own merchandise. Eli made his way over, aware of the glances that followed him. A stranger was always worth watching in a place like this. "Whiskey," he said when the bartender approached. "And a room if you've got one." "Whiskey's 2 bits, room's 4 bits. In advance." The man's eyes took in Eli's travel-worn appearance, the way his coat hung to suggest the gun beneath. "No trouble, mister. We run a peaceful establishment." Eli laid coins on the bar. "No trouble for me, just passing through." The whiskey burned, but it was welcome after the cold ride. Eli nursed it slowly, letting the feeling return to his fingers, while the bartender fetched a key. It was then that the piano music changed, shifting from random noise to something approaching a melody. The crowd's attention turned toward the small stage at the back of the room, and despite himself, Eli looked too. She appeared like something from another world, a flash of red satin in the dingy saloon. Clara May moved with a grace that seemed out of place here, her movements telling a story of loss and longing that needed no words. When she began to sing, her voice carrying a ballad about a woman waiting for a love who would never return, the room fell into an unusual hush. Eli found himself transfixed, not by her beauty, though she was beautiful, but by something else, something in the way she held herself apart, even while performing for the crowd. He recognized it because he saw it in his own mirror. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and was still, somehow, standing. Their eyes met across the smoky room. Just for a moment. Hers widened slightly, as if surprised to find someone actually seeing her rather than just looking. Then she turned away, continuing her dance. But Eli felt something shift inside his chest, like ice beginning to crack after a long winter. He would tell himself later that he stayed to finish his whiskey, that the storm outside made leaving foolish. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. For the first time in 3 days, in months, really, Eli Boone felt something other than numbness, and in a saloon in the middle of nowhere, watching a widow dance alone. He remembered what it was like to be human. The room Cyrus Webb had grudgingly provided was barely larger than a horse stall, containing only a narrow bed with a straw mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a single hook on the wall for clothes. Rain drummed against the small window, and wind whistled through gaps in the frame. Eli set his saddlebags in the corner and laid his Winchester against the wall within easy reach. Old habits died hard. He'd intended to sleep, to let the whiskey and exhaustion carry him into oblivion until morning. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself sitting on the edge of the bed, listening to the muffled sounds from below, the clink of glasses, the rough laughter, and threading through it all, her voice. Clara May sang 2 more songs before the music stopped, and Eli imagined her retreating to whatever corner she'd carved out for herself in this place. The next morning dawned gray and cold, the storm having passed but leaving the streets a muddy mess. Eli woke stiff from the lumpy bed and made his way downstairs. The saloon looked different in daylight, shabbier, smaller. The sticky floors and scarred tables revealed in unforgiving detail. A different man stood behind the bar, older and bearing the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent too many years bending over wash tubs. "Coffee?" the man asked, and Eli nodded gratefully. It was bitter and thick enough to float a horseshoe, but it was hot. Eli took his cup to a table by the window where he could watch the street. Ash Hollow was coming to life slowly. A few women with baskets hurrying toward the general store, a freight wagon struggling through the mud, a dog investigating the garbage behind the hotel. "You the fellow came in last night?" Eli looked up to find a man standing nearby, wearing a sheriff's star that had seen better days. He was younger than most lawmen Eli had encountered, maybe late 20s, with the eager look of someone trying to prove himself. "That's right," Eli answered carefully. "Just passing through. Name's Tom Garrett, sheriff here." He didn't offer his hand. "Mind telling me your business?" "Eli Boone." "Like I said, just passing through. Weather drove me in." Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly. "Boone. Why do I know that name?" Eli sighed inwardly. His reputation, such as it was, had a way of following him. There was some trouble up near the Platte a few years back. 3 men tried to rob a stage I was guarding. They didn't succeed. You killed them. They didn't give me much choice. The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. "Well, we don't want any trouble here. You planning on staying long?" "Day or 2 at most. My horse needs rest." "See, that's all it is." Garrett touched his hat brim and moved on, but Eli could feel his watchful presence even after he'd left. "Over the next hour." Eli observed the morning rituals of the saloon. The old bartender swept the floors, pushing the debris of the previous night into piles. A couple of working girls appeared, looking haggard in the daylight, and disappeared upstairs. But no sign of Clara May. She finally emerged near noon, dressed simply in a dark blue dress that had been mended multiple times but was clean and pressed, without the red satin and painted face. She looked younger, more vulnerable. She moved to the bar and spoke quietly with the old man, who shook his head and pointed toward a door marked Private. Eli watched her shoulders slump slightly before she knocked and entered what he assumed was Webb's office. She emerged 10 minutes later, her face carefully composed but her hands clenched at her sides. This time, when she turned toward the door, she saw him watching. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the empty saloon. Then she lifted her chin slightly, a gesture of defiance or pride. He couldn't tell which, and walked out. Eli finished his coffee and followed. He found her behind the saloon, sitting on an overturned crate and staring at the endless prairie beyond the town's edge. She didn't turn when his boots crunched on the gravel, but her spine stiffened. "If you're looking for company, mister, I don't work days," she said, her voice flat. "Not looking for that kind of company?" Eli stopped a respectful distance away. "Just thought you might want to know that Ed Fowler was making free with his hands last night until I suggested he might want to reconsider." Now she did turn, studying him with those storm blue eyes. "You're the one who stared him down. I wondered." She paused. "Why?" Eli shrugged. "Didn't seem right, is all. Nothing about this place seems right. Mr. Boone, Eli Boone." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Well, Mr. Boone, I appreciate the gesture, but it only made things worse. Cyrus docked my pay for losing a customer. Apparently, I'm supposed to let them paw at me if it keeps them drinking. That's not right either. A lot of things aren't right. Doesn't change them." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I need to go. The boarding house only serves lunch until 1, and if I miss it, let me buy you lunch. The hotel dining room's decent enough." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really are new here, aren't you? The hotel doesn't serve fallen women, Mr. Boone. Neither does the cafe. I'm lucky the boarding house takes my money, though they make me use the back door." The matter-of-fact way she said it sparked something in Eli's chest. Anger, maybe, or recognition of injustice that went beyond his own troubles. "Then we'll get supplies from the general store. Have a picnic. In February. Sun's out now. Might even hit 40 degrees. She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Why would you do that?" Eli considered the question. Why was he involving himself? He'd come here to disappear, not to get tangled in someone else's problems. But something about her, the dignity she maintained despite everything, the way she'd sung last night like her heart was breaking, wouldn't let him walk away. "Because I recognize the look," he said finally, "of someone who's lost everything but keeps going anyway, and because I haven't had a decent conversation with anyone in 3 months." Clara May studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing risks, calculating what he might want in return. Finally, she nodded slightly. "The general store won't serve me either, but there's a Mexican woman who sells tamales from her kitchen on the south side. Rosa doesn't care about my reputation as long as my money's good." They walked through the back alleys to avoid the main street, Clara May leading the way with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to navigate the shadows. The Mexican quarter was even poorer than the rest of Ash Hollow. Adobe houses patched with whatever materials could be found. Children playing in the dirt despite the cold. Rosa turned out to be a round woman with kind eyes who greeted Clara May warmly and eyed Eli with curiosity but no judgment. They bought tamales wrapped in corn husks and cups of thick, spicy hot chocolate, then found a spot on a rise overlooking the town where the sun had warmed the rocks. "So, Mr. Boone," Clara May said after they'd eaten in companionable silence for a while. "What brings a man to Ash Hollow in the dead of winter?" Eli told her, surprising himself with the honesty of it. "The ranch, the Carlson brothers, the fire." She listened without interrupting, her eyes on the horizon. "I'm sorry," she said when he finished. "To build something with your own hands and have it taken, I can't imagine." "Can't you?" He gestured toward the town below. "Seems to me you understand loss well enough." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Jake always promised we'd have a ranch someday. Every time he'd lose at cards or drink away our savings, he'd promise, 'Next time, Clara may. Next time we'll go to California, buy some land, raise horses.' I believed him for longer than I should have. He was your husband. For 5 years, met him in Kansas City. I was 17, working in my uncle's store. Jake came in looking for ammunition, ended up courting me for 3 months. He could be charming when he wanted." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "My uncle warned me, said Jake had the look of trouble, but I was young and thought I knew better. We all make mistakes when we're young. Some mistakes you pay for longer than others." She stood abruptly. "I should get back. Evening show starts at 7, and Cyrus will dock me again if I'm late." They walked back mostly in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet than before, companionable rather than wary. At the back door of the saloon, Clara May paused. "Thank you for lunch. Mr. Boone, it was nice to talk to someone who doesn't want anything from me. Would you—" Eli stopped, suddenly unsure. "Would you mind if I stayed another day? My horse could use the extra rest." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or hope quickly suppressed. "It's a free country, Mr. Boone. You can stay or go as you please." That night, Eli sat in the same corner of the saloon, nursing the same whiskey. But this time, when Clara May danced, he didn't just watch, he saw how she flinched slightly when men called out crude comments. Saw how her smile never wavered even when someone threw coins at her feet like she was a beggar. Saw how she collected those coins anyway because pride didn't pay for food. When Ed Fowler showed up again, drunker than the night before and mean with it, Eli was ready. The man made a grab for Clara May as she passed his table, catching her wrist and trying to pull her onto his lap. Eli moved without thinking, his hand closing on Fowler's shoulder. "I believe the lady's working," he said quietly. Fowler turned, his face flushed with drink and anger. "And I believe you should mind your own business. Drifter, let her go." "Or what?" Eli didn't need to say anything. Something in his eyes, the absolute calm that comes from having faced death and survived, made Fowler's hand open. Clara May pulled free, shooting Eli a look he couldn't decipher before hurrying to the stage. "This ain't over," Fowler muttered, but he was already backing down. "Yes," Eli said simply, "it is." Later, as the saloon emptied and Clara May collected her meager earnings from Webb, who complained loudly about her causing trouble again, Eli waited outside. She emerged looking tired beyond her years. "You can't keep doing that," she said without preamble. "It only makes things worse for me." "Then maybe it's time to change things." She laughed, but it was hollow. "Change things? Mr. Boone, men like you can ride into town one day and out the next. Women like me, we're trapped by more than just geography. Are you? You know nothing about it. I know you deserve better than this." Deserving and getting are two different things. She pulled her thin shawl tighter. "Good night, Mr. Boone. Safe travels tomorrow." But as she walked away, Eli made a decision. He wouldn't leave tomorrow. Something was happening here, something he didn't fully understand yet. All he knew was that for the first time since watching his ranch burn, he felt something other than emptiness, and that was worth staying for, at least a little while longer. Days turned into a week, and still Eli remained in Ash Hollow. He found work at the livery stable, where the Swedish proprietor, Lars Lindström, was grateful for help from someone who actually knew horses. The pay was modest, but it included a small room above the stable that was cleaner and quieter than the saloon. "You know your way around horses?" Lars observed on Eli's third day, watching him gentle a skittish mare that had been giving everyone else trouble. "Where you learn?" "Here and there," Eli answered. running his hand along the mare's neck. Had a ranch for a while. Lars nodded, recognizing the tone that said further questions weren't welcome. Well, you need work longer than a week. You got it. Each evening, Eli found himself at the dusty spur. He told himself he was just having his nightly whiskey, that the saloon was simply the only entertainment in town, but he knew he was lying. He came to see Clara May, to watch her dance and sing, to catch those brief moments when their eyes would meet across the smoky room. He learned her routines, 3 shows a night, different songs for each. The rowdy ones early when the Cowboys were fresh off the range, the sadder ballads later when the whiskey had made everyone maudlin. And always, that careful distance she maintained, like armor made of air. One evening, after a particularly cold day that had left ice crystals on the stable windows, Clara May didn't appear for her first show, or her second. Cyrus Webb paced behind the bar, muttering curses about unreliable women. The crowd grew restless, and some began to leave. Eli found Webb during a lull. "Where's Clara May?" "How should I know? Probably sick, or drunk. They're all the same." Webb spat into a brass spittoon. "If she's not here tomorrow, she's finished." Without thinking, Eli left the saloon and made his way to the boarding house where he knew Clara May rented a room. The proprietress, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Hutchins, answered his knock with suspicion. "I don't allow gentlemen callers," she snapped. "This is a respectable establishment." "I'm not a caller. I'm concerned about Miss Watson. She didn't show up for work." "That's no concern of mine. She pays her rent. She keeps her room. Beyond that..." Mrs. Hutchins started to close the door. Eli put his hand against it. "Is she ill? How would I know? I don't associate with her type." But something in Eli's expression made her add, "She came in this afternoon looking peaked. Haven't seen her since." Eli pushed past the protesting woman and climbed the narrow stairs. He found Clara May's room by the sound of coughing, deep, racking coughs that spoke of more than a simple cold. He knocked softly. "Go away." Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Clara May, it's Eli. Open the door. I said go away. I can't work tonight. I'm not here about work. Open the door or I'll break it down." A long pause, then the sound of shuffling feet. The door opened a crack, revealing Clara May wrapped in a thin blanket, her face flushed with fever. She swayed on her feet, and Eli caught her before she could fall. The room was freezing, the small coal stove dark and cold. Eli helped her back to the narrow bed, then set about lighting the stove, finding it empty of fuel. "Coal costs extra," Clara May mumbled. "Couldn't afford it this week." Eli bit back a curse and covered her with every blanket he could find in the room. Precious few. "I'll be back." He returned 20 minutes later with an armload of coal, clean water from the well, and willow bark tea from Rosa, who had clucked her tongue and muttered in Spanish about foolish gringos who didn't take care of each other. Mrs. Hutchins tried to protest his presence, but the look in Eli's eyes silenced her. Through the night, Eli tended to Clara May. He kept the stove burning, made her drink the bitter tea, placed cool cloths on her forehead when the fever spiked. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering Jake's name, sometimes singing fragments of songs. "You shouldn't be here," she said during one lucid moment, her eyes focusing on his face in the lamplight. "People will talk. Let them talk. You don't understand. My reputation is all I have left. If I lose that..." "Your reputation." Eli couldn't keep the anger from his voice. "Clara May, this town already treats you like a pariah. What reputation are you protecting?" Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "The one that says I'm not what they think I am, that I'm just trying to survive, not what Jake's other women were." "Jake had other women?" She turned her face away. "He had lots of things I didn't know about until after. Debts, enemies, women in every town from here to Texas." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm being punished for not seeing what he was, for loving him anyway." Eli took her hand, feeling how small and cold it was in his. "You're not being punished. You're just trying to live. There's no shame in that." She squeezed his hand weakly before sleep took her again. By morning, the fever had broken. Clara May woke to find Eli asleep in the room's single chair, his long legs stretched out awkwardly. The sight of him, this quiet, dangerous man who'd spent the night caring for her without asking for anything in return, made something crack inside her chest. He stirred when she tried to sit up. "How are you feeling?" "Better, weak, but better." She pulled the blankets higher, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "You stayed all night. Someone had to. This room's cold enough to kill someone." "Mrs. Hutchins will have spread it all over town by now." "I told you, let them talk." Eli stood, stretching. "You need food. I'll get some soup from Rosa." "I can't pay you back." He stopped at the door. "I'm not asking you to." While he was gone, Clara May managed to wash her face and change into a clean dress. Her reflection in the small mirror showed hollow cheeks and shadowed eyes. But she was alive. That was more than she'd been sure of in the dark hours of the night when the fever had made her see Jake standing in the corner, beckoning her to follow him. Eli returned with not just soup, but fresh bread, butter, and even a small jar of honey. "Rosa said you need to build your strength. She also said to tell you she's praying for you." "Rosa's a good woman." Clara May accepted the soup gratefully, surprised by how hungry she was. One of the few who doesn't judge. They ate in companionable silence, the morning sun finally bringing some warmth to the room. Outside, Ash Hollow was coming to life, wagon wheels creaking, dogs barking, the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer. "I should go," Eli said eventually. "Lars will be wondering where I am." "Eli?" Clara May stopped him at the door. "Why are you doing this? Really?" He considered the question, his hand on the doorknob. "Maybe because I'm tired of watching good people get ground down. Maybe because you remind me that there's still something worth protecting in this world." He met her eyes. Or maybe just because it's the right thing to do. After he left, Clara May lay back against the pillows, her mind churning. She'd learned not to trust kindness from men. It always came with a price. But Eli seemed different. There was a sadness in him that matched her own, a loss that went beyond property or pride. He understood what it was like to have everything taken and still have to wake up the next morning. That evening, despite her weakness, Clara May dressed for work. She couldn't afford to lose her position at the saloon, meager as it was. When she arrived, Cyrus Webb was waiting, his face red with anger. "You cost me money last night," he snarled. "Empty seats because you couldn't be bothered to show up." "I was ill. I don't pay for excuses." He leaned in close, his breath sour with whiskey and tobacco. "You're done here. Clear out your things." Clara May felt the floor drop out from under her. Without the saloon job, she had nothing, no way to pay rent, buy food, survive. "Please, Mr. Webb, it won't happen again." "Too late. I've already hired your replacement, younger, prettier, and more accommodating." His leer made his meaning clear. She was gathering the few personal items from her dressing area when Eli appeared. He took in the scene, her trembling hands, Webb's satisfied smirk, and his jaw tightened. "Problem here?" "No problem," Webb said, "just taking out the trash." Eli moved so fast Webb didn't have time to react. One moment the saloon owner was standing, the next he was pressed against the bar with Eli's forearm across his throat. "Apologize to the lady. What?" Webb's eyes bulged. "Apologize. Now." "I'm sorry." Webb gasped. Eli released him. "Now you're going to pay her what she's owed, plus an extra week for the inconvenience." "The hell I will." Eli's hand moved to his gun. He didn't draw it, just let his palm rest on the grip. "I wasn't asking." Webb's face went from red to white. He fumbled with the cash box, counting out bills with shaking hands. Clara May watched in stunned silence as Eli took the money and handed it to her. "Let's go," he said quietly. They walked out together, leaving Webb gasping and the saloon patrons staring. On the street, Clara May finally found her voice. You just cost me any chance of working in this town again. You weren't going to get that chance anyway. Not here, not like this. Eli stopped walking, turning to face her. I have a proposition. She stiffened. Here it comes. She thought. The price. But what he said next surprised her. I'm leaving Ash Hollow tomorrow. Come with me. What? There's nothing for either of us here. I heard there's work in Montana, real work, on cattle ranches. They need cooks, seamstresses, people who can work. It's hard, but it's honest. Clara May stared at him. You're asking me to just leave? With you? People would assume. Let them assume. We know the truth. His eyes were steady on hers. I'm offering you a chance at something better. That's all. And what do you get out of it? Maybe a traveling companion who doesn't bore me to death. Maybe a friend. He paused. Maybe just the knowledge that I helped someone when I could. Clara May looked around at Ash Hollow, the muddy streets, the cold faces, the saloon that had been her prison. Then she looked at Eli, this strange, kind man who asked nothing of her but her company. I have one condition, she said. Name it. We stop at the cemetery on the way out. She lifted her chin. I need to say goodbye. Eli nodded. Fair enough. As they parted, him to make preparations, her to pack her meager belongings, Clara May felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Not quite happiness, but something close to it. Hope. Maybe the possibility that tomorrow might be different from today. She touched the money in her pocket. Wages she'd earned but never expected to see. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a new start. And sometimes, that was all anyone needed, just enough to begin again. The Nebraska prairies stretched endless under the March sun, a sea of brown grass rippling in the constant wind. They'd been traveling for 3 days now, following wagon ruts that passed for a road, heading northwest toward Montana. During the day, the sun warmed them, but night still carried winter's bite, forcing them to camp close to the meager fires they built from buffalo chips and sparse cottonwood. Clara May had never spent so much time outdoors. Her life had been confined to towns, to rooms with walls and ceilings. Now the sky seemed impossibly vast, and sometimes she felt like she might float away into all that blue, if not for the solid presence of the horse beneath her. Eli had bought her a gentle mare from Lars before they left, a brown and white paint with patient eyes. Can't have you riding double all the way to Montana, he'd said, brushing off her protests about the expense. Consider it an investment in not having my back go out. She'd named the mare Buttercup, which made Eli smile, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, easing the hard lines and making him look younger, almost boyish. Buttercup's a pretty fancy name for a trail horse, he'd said. She needs something pretty in her life. Clara May had responded. Don't we all? They developed a routine quickly. Up before dawn, coffee and cold biscuits if they had them, then hours of riding. Eli taught her how to read the land, where to find water, how to spot weather changes, which plants the horses could eat. He was patient with her inexperience, never mocking when she struggled with tasks he found simple. You're learning, he'd say when she apologized for taking too long to saddle Buttercup. Everyone starts somewhere. The first week, they barely talked beyond necessities. Clara May was still waiting for the moment when Eli would reveal his true intentions, when the price of his kindness would come due. But he kept his distance, always setting up her bedroll on the opposite side of the fire, always announcing himself before approaching if she'd wandered off for privacy. It was the 8th night when things shifted. They'd made camp near a small creek, the first running water they'd found in 2 days. Clara May had washed her face and hands, feeling almost human again, when she returned to find Eli staring into the fire with an expression she recognized, the look of someone seeing ghosts in the flames. Bad memories? She asked softly, settling onto her blanket. He glanced up, seeming surprised she'd spoken. Something like that. Want to talk about it? Not much to say, just thinking about waste, all that work, all those dreams, gone in one night. He poked at the fire with a stick. You ever think about that? How quick things can be destroyed compared to how long they take to build? Clara May pulled her shawl tighter. Every day, Jake and we had plans once, nothing grand, just a little place of our own. Maybe some chickens, a garden, foolish dreams. Not foolish, just human. He used to talk about it when he was drunk, how he'd win big, buy us that spread, make me a proper rancher's wife. She laughed bitterly. Course, he'd lose big just as often. Lost more than money in the end. Eli was quiet for a moment. You loved him. It wasn't a question, but Clara May answered anyway. I did. Lord help me. Even when I knew what he was, I loved him. Maybe that makes me a fool. Makes you human, Eli repeated. We can't always choose who we love. Did you ever... She let the question hang. Once, Sarah was her name, schoolteacher's daughter back in Missouri. His voice was distant, remembering. Pretty as a spring morning and twice as sweet. We were going to marry, soon as I saved enough for a place. What happened? Cholera. Took her and half the town in 2 weeks. He threw the stick into the fire, watching it catch. That's when I headed west. Couldn't stand being where every corner held a memory. They sat in companionable silence. Two people who understood that sometimes love was just another word for loss. The next day brought them to the Platte River, swollen with early snowmelt. Eli studied the crossing, not liking what he saw. Current strong. We'll need to be careful. He went first, his black gelding sure-footed and calm. But when Clara May urged Buttercup into the water, the mare balked, dancing sideways. The current caught them, and suddenly Clara May felt the horse losing her footing. Eli! The water was shockingly cold, pulling at her skirts. He was there in an instant, grabbing Buttercup's bridle, using his horse's strength to steady them. Easy, easy now. Just keep her head up. That's it. They made it across, but Clara May was soaked and shaking. From cold and fear both. Eli helped her down, her legs too weak to support her. I'm sorry, she gasped. I should have... Stop! He was already pulling a dry blanket from his pack. You did fine. Horse got spooked. Happens to everyone. He built a fire quickly, efficiently, then turned his back while she changed into dry clothes. When she emerged, wrapped in the blanket, he had coffee brewing and was laying her wet things over rocks to dry. Thank you, she said, settling near the fire. You keep saving me. You'd do the same. Would I? I'm not sure I'm that brave. He looked at her across the fire. You left everything you knew to ride into the wilderness with a near stranger. That takes a kind of courage I'm not sure I have. That night, she didn't protest when he set up his bedroll closer to hers. For warmth, he said, and she nodded, though they both knew it was more than that. It was acknowledgement that something was building between them, fragile as new ice, but just as real. 2 days later, they reached Ogallala, a rough cattle town that made Ash Hollow look civilized. Eli went to buy supplies while Clara May waited with the horses, trying to ignore the stares of passing cowboys. She'd thought herself hardened to such attention, but after days of only Eli's respectful company, the leering felt freshly insulting. Well, well, what's a pretty thing like you doing all alone? 3 men had approached, trail hands by their look, drunk despite the early hour. The one who'd spoken had mean eyes and a scar that pulled his lip into a permanent sneer. I'm not alone, Clara May said evenly. My companion will return shortly. Companion, the man laughed. That what they're calling it now? She tried to move away, but he grabbed her arm. How much, sweetheart? We got paid yesterday. Can make it worth your while. Let me go. She kept her voice calm despite her racing heart. Now don't be like that. The distinctive click of a hammer being cocked cut through his words. Eli stood 10 feet away, his Colt aimed steady at the man's head. The lady said, "Let go." The drunk released Clara May's arm, hands rising slowly. Easy, friend. Just having a conversation. Conversation's over. Eli's voice was flat, deadly. Move on. There's 3 of us, mister. one of the other cowboys said, though he sounded less sure. Then I'll need 3 bullets. I've got 6, so I'm not worried. Something in his stance, the absolute confidence of a man who'd killed before and would again if needed, made the cowboys back down. They shuffled away, muttering threats they'd never follow through on. Eli holstered his gun and came to Clara May. "You all right?" "Yes," but her hands were shaking. "I thought I was past being afraid of men like that." "Fear's nothing to be ashamed of. Keeps us alive." He touched her shoulder gently. "Let's get what we need and get out of here." They camped that night 20 miles from town, in a grove of cottonwoods by a small stream. Clara May was quiet, lost in thought, and Eli let her be, understanding sometimes a person needed to work through things alone. Finally, as the stars emerged in the darkening sky, she spoke. "I used to dance for men like those. Let them think what they wanted, as long as they paid. You did what you had to do to survive. Did I? Or did I just take the easy path?" She hugged her knees. "Maybe if I'd tried harder, found other work." Clara May. Eli moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I see someone who faced impossible choices and chose to live. Someone who maintained her dignity when the whole world tried to strip it away. Someone strong enough to start over when most would have given up." He paused. "I see someone I admire." The tears came then, silent at first, then in great gulping sobs. Months of grief and fear and loneliness poured out while Eli sat quietly beside her, his presence a steady anchor. When the storm passed, she found herself leaning against his shoulder, his arm around her, protective and warm. "I'm not what you think," she whispered. "I'm not strong. I'm scared all the time." "So am I," he admitted. "Scared I'll lose everything again. Scared I'll end up alone with nothing but empty horizons. Scared of wanting things I can't have." She pulled back to look at his face. "What do you want?" His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "Right now. This. Just this." When he kissed her, it was nothing like Jake's rough demands. It was gentle, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her hands finding his shoulders, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Clara May managed a shaky laugh. "This complicates things." "Does it?" Eli asked. "Seems pretty simple to me." "And what's simple about it?" "I care about you. Think maybe you care about me. Rest is just details." She wanted to argue, to point out all the reasons it couldn't work, but sitting there in the circle of his arms with the vast prairie night around them, she couldn't remember why those reasons mattered. Tomorrow they'd reach the harder trail through Wyoming. Tomorrow there'd be new challenges, new fears. But tonight, under the endless stars, Clara May allowed herself to believe in possibility again. When Eli spread his bedroll beside hers, "Still for warmth," he said with a small smile. She didn't protest. And when she woke in the darkest part of night to find his hand holding hers across the small space between them, she held on tight and didn't let go. The storm rolled in from the mountains like a living thing, black clouds swallowing the afternoon sun. They'd been pushing hard for 3 days through Wyoming territory, trying to make Fort Laramie before their supplies ran too low. Now, with lightning splitting the sky and the first fat drops of rain hitting the dust, Eli knew they wouldn't make it. "There!" He pointed to a line of bluffs ahead. "Should be caves in those rocks." They urged the horses to a gallop, racing the storm. The rain hit in earnest just as they found shelter. A shallow cave, but dry and large enough for them and the horses. Eli quickly unsaddled the animals while Clara May gathered what dry wood she could find near the entrance. Within minutes, the storm had turned the world into a gray wall of water. Thunder crashed so close it shook the ground, and the horses pressed against the back wall, eyes rolling white. Clara May stood at the cave mouth, transfixed by the violence of it. "Beautiful," she breathed, "and terrifying." Eli joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. That's the West for you. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They'd grown comfortable with such closeness over the past days, though they hadn't kissed again since that night under the stars. It was as if they both understood they were balanced on a knife's edge, and one wrong move might cut too deep. "We should be safe here," Eli said, turning back to build a fire with the wood she'd gathered. "Storm like this won't last long." But it did last. Hours passed, the rain showing no sign of stopping. They shared what cold food they had, sitting close to the small fire, listening to the storm's fury. The cave began to feel like they were the only two people in the world. "I used to be afraid of storms," Clara May said quietly. "When I was little, my mother would hold me, sing hymns until the thunder passed." "What happened to her?" "Died when I was 12. Consumption. Father tried to raise me right, but he was a hard man. Thought the best thing for a motherless girl was to marry her off quick." She stared into the fire. "That's how I ended up with my uncle in Kansas City. Father figured a shopkeeper would make a good husband eventually. But you met Jake instead." "But I met Jake instead." She smiled ruefully. "Father never forgave me for that. Died thinking I'd thrown my life away." "Had you?" Clara May considered. "Ask me a month ago. I'd have said yes. Now." She looked at him. "Now I think maybe everything happens for a reason, even the bad things." The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Outside, the storm began to ease, though rain still fell steadily. The horses had calmed, dozing, standing up in the way of their kind. "Eli," Clara May said suddenly, "what happens when we reach Montana?" He'd been dreading this conversation. "We find work, build something new, together. If that's what you want." She turned to face him fully. "What do you want?" "You know what I want." "Do I? Because sometimes I think I do. But then you pull back, and I wonder if I'm just fooling myself again." Eli ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to speak what he felt. "I'm trying to do right by you, Clara May. You've been through enough without me adding to it. What if I don't want you to do right by me?" She moved closer. "What if I want you to just be honest about what you feel? You want honesty?" His voice roughened. "Fine. I think about you every minute of every day. I watch you sleep and have to stop myself from reaching out to touch your face. I see you smile and forget how to breathe. I want things I have no right to want, not when you're still grieving, still healing. I'm not made of glass. Eli, I won't break." She reached up, her hand cupping his jaw. "And I stopped grieving Jake the day I left Ash Hollow. Maybe before." "Clara May, no." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "No more noble restraint, no more careful distance. I'm tired of being careful. I've been careful my whole life, and where did it get me?" She kissed him then, with all the longing of the past weeks poured into it. This time, Eli didn't hold back. His arms came around her, pulling her close, one hand tangling in her hair. The pins scattered, and her hair fell around them like a curtain, shutting out everything but this moment, when they finally parted, both breathing hard. Clara May's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm not asking for promises," she whispered. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking for now, for whatever time we have." Eli framed her face with his hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "You deserve more than stolen moments in a cave. Maybe, but this is what we have." She turned her head to kiss his palm. "Please, Eli. I've been cold for so long. Let me be warm again." He could have resisted his own desires, had been doing so for days. But faced with hers, with the naked need in her eyes that matched his own, his resolve crumbled. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt her melt against him. They made a bed of their blankets, there in the circle of firelight with the storm as witness. Eli's hands shook as he helped her with the buttons of her dress, revealing skin pale as moonlight. She was thinner than she should be, ribs showing clearly, but to him she was perfect. "Beautiful," he murmured against her throat. "So beautiful." Clara May arched beneath his touch, rediscovering sensations she'd thought deadened forever. Jake had taken what he wanted, when he wanted it. But Eli gave, worshipping her with gentle hands and reverent kisses until she felt like she might dissolve from the sweetness of it. When they came together at last, it was with a desperate tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Eli caught them with his lips, murmuring endearments against her skin. They moved together in ancient rhythm while the storm raged outside, two souls finding shelter in each other. Afterward, they lay entwined, Clara May's head on Eli's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. The fire had burned low, casting more shadows than light. The rain had finally stopped, leaving only the drip of water from the cave mouth. "No regrets?" Eli asked quietly, his hand stroking her hair. "None? You? Only that I waited so long." She smiled against his skin. "We had to be sure, both of us." "And are you? Sure?" Clara May propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. "I'm sure that I feel more alive right now than I have in years. I'm sure that you're a good man, maybe the best I've known, and I'm sure that whatever happens tomorrow, I'll never regret tonight." He pulled her down for another kiss, slow and sweet. "Stay with me," he said against her lips. "Not just tonight, not just to Montana. Stay with me. Is that a proposal, Mr. Boone?" "Maybe." "Would you say yes if it was?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Jake never actually asked me to marry him. Just announced one day that we were getting married, like it was already decided. I think I'd like to be asked properly, when the time is right. Then I'll ask properly, when the time is right." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But know this, my intentions are honorable. Clara May Watson, I want to court you, marry you, build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and know you're mine to protect and cherish." "Protect, maybe," she said with a small smile. "But I think I'm done being someone's possession. Partners, Eli, that's what I want. Someone to stand beside, not behind. Partners." He agreed. "Though you should know I'm still going to try to protect you. It's in my nature. And I'll protect you right back. That's what partners do." They dressed as the last of the storm clouds passed, revealing stars beginning to peek through. The world smelled fresh and clean, washed new by the rain. As they rebuilt the fire and prepared to sleep, properly this time, with Clara May wrapped in Eli's arms, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. "Tell me about Montana," she said drowsily. "What's it like?" "Big sky country. They call it mountains that touch the clouds, valleys green as Ireland, rivers so clear you can see the bottom 20 feet down, and space, Clara May, so much space a person can breathe. Sounds like paradise. It's hard country too, winters that can kill you if you're not prepared, Indians who don't much care for settlers, work that breaks your back and calloused your hands." He paused. "But there's a freedom to it, a chance to be who you choose to be, not who the world says you are." "That's all I want," she murmured, already half asleep. "A chance to choose." As her breathing deepened into sleep, Eli held her close and made silent promises to the stars. He'd failed to protect his ranch, had lost everything to violence and greed. But this woman in his arms, this unexpected gift, her, he would not fail. Whatever it took, whatever came, he would give her that chance to choose her own life. The fire burned low again, but Eli didn't move to tend it. Instead, he pulled the blanket higher over them both and closed his eyes. Tomorrow they'd ride on, face whatever challenges the trail would bring. But tonight, in a cave somewhere in Wyoming territory, two broken people had found something whole, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Fort Laramie sprawled across the plains like a small city, its adobe walls and wooden buildings a welcome sight after weeks on the trail. Eli and Clara May rode in mid-morning, dusty and travel-worn, but in good spirits. They'd made good time since the storm, the weather holding fair and the horses staying sound. "We'll resupply here," Eli said as they passed through the fort's gates. "Rest a day, maybe two. then push on to Montana. Clara May nodded, though her attention was caught by the bustle of civilization, soldiers drilling in the yard, emigrant wagons being repaired, women in actual dresses walking on actual boardwalks. After so long with only Eli for company, it felt overwhelming. They found lodging at a boarding house that catered to travelers, run by a German woman who took one look at Clara May's ringless finger and put them in separate rooms without comment. Clara May felt oddly disappointed by the narrow bed with its thin mattress, already missing the warmth of Eli's presence beside her. That evening, in the boarding house's small dining room, the news reached them. The woman at the next table, a merchant's wife heading to Oregon, shared it with the breathless excitement of someone delivering scandal. "Did you hear? There was a terrible fire near the Platte River settlement. A ranch burned to the ground. They say it was those awful Carlson brothers. They've been arrested for it, and 2 other fires besides." Eli's fork stilled halfway to his mouth. Clara May saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the utensil. "Arrested?" he asked carefully. The woman nodded eagerly, pleased to have an audience. "Oh yes, they got careless. You see, got drunk in a saloon and bragged about running off some squatter, their words, who thought he could steal water that belonged to them. But the territorial marshal was there, dressed as a drifter, arrested them on the spot." "What will happen to them?" Clara May asked when Eli remained silent. "Trial in Cheyenne. Though everyone knows they'll hang. The territorial governor's trying to bring law to Wyoming. Can't have men burning out their neighbors." The woman leaned in conspiratorially. "They say the man they burned out disappeared, probably dead in the fire. Poor soul." Eli stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me." He left the dining room, and after a moment's hesitation, Clara May followed. She found him outside, standing in the darkness beyond the boarding house's light. His shoulders were rigid, hands clenched at his sides. "Eli? They bragged about it." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Destroyed everything I built and bragged about it. But they've been caught. They'll pay for what they did. Will they? 3 years of my life, gone. My horses, my dreams, everything." He turned to her, and in the dim light she could see the raw pain in his eyes. "And I ran. Instead of fighting for what was mine, I ran. You survived." Clara May said firmly, "That's not running. That's wisdom." "Is it?" He laughed bitterly. "A wise man would have seen it coming. Would have prepared better, fought back, something. A wise man would have gotten himself killed and accomplished nothing." She moved closer, placing her hand on his arm. "Eli, if you'd stayed and fought, you'd be dead, and I'd be—" She paused, swallowing hard. "I'd still be dancing in that saloon, dying a little more each day." His expression softened slightly. "Clara May, no, listen to me. You think you failed because you didn't stand and fight? You succeeded because you lived, because you were there when I needed someone, because you gave me hope when I had none left." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Your ranch can be rebuilt, but you can't be replaced." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "Maybe we found each other." She pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and trail dust that meant safety to her now. "The Carlson brothers will hang for what they did. That's justice. Eli, take it and be grateful." They stood there in the darkness, holding each other while the fort settled into evening routines around them. Finally. Eli pulled back enough to see her face. "Marry me." Clara May blinked. "What?" "You said you wanted to be asked properly. I'm asking, marry me. Clara May, not someday, not in Montana. Here, now, tonight if we can find a preacher." "Eli, you're upset about the news. This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time." His hands framed her face. "I've lost everything once. I won't risk losing you too. Not to accident or illness or some other man who sees what I see. Marry me, be my wife, my partner, my reason to keep building even when everything burns down." Clara May's heart raced. "People will say we're rushing, that it's too soon." Let them say it. I don't care about people. I care about you. His thumb stroked her cheek. But if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll court you proper in Montana, if that's what you want. Just tell me there's hope. She looked into his eyes, seeing the fear there, not of the Carlson brothers or rebuilding his life, but of losing her. This strong, quiet man who'd shown her more genuine care in a few weeks than Jake had in 5 years was afraid she'd say no. Yes, she whispered. Yes, there's hope. Or yes, I'll marry you. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you want. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Yes, Ely Boone. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, right there in the yard where anyone could see. And Clara May didn't care. Let them gossip. Let them judge. She was done living by other people's rules. They found a chaplain at the fort, a young lieutenant who performed weddings for emigrants passing through. He was reluctant at first. It was late, and they had no witnesses. But Eli's quiet intensity and Clara May's tears convinced him. You'll need witnesses, the chaplain said. 2 at least. I'll stand for them. The German boarding house proprietress appeared in the doorway, followed by her husband. Been watching you two all evening. About time, I'd say. And so, in a small chapel lit by oil lamps, with strangers for witnesses and trail dust still on their clothes, Clara May Watson became Clara May Boone. The chaplain's words were simple, the ceremony brief. But when Eli slipped a plain silver band on her finger, purchased hastily from the fort's trader, Clara May felt something settle deep in her chest. You may kiss your bride, the chaplain said with a small smile. Eli's kiss was gentle, almost reverent, but Clara May could feel the promise in it. When they parted, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. The boarding house proprietress insisted on moving them to her best room. A wedding night in separate beds? Unthinkable. And even produced a small cake she'd been saving for Sunday. As they sat in their room afterward, sharing the cake and a bottle of wine the German woman's husband had contributed, Clara May kept looking at the ring on her finger. Regrets? Eli asked, catching her expression. No, just surprise. I suppose. This morning I was Clara May Watson, widow and former saloon dancer. Tonight I'm Clara May Boone, married woman with a future. She smiled at him. It's a lot to take in. We can slow down if you need. Take our time getting to Montana. Maybe see some sights. No. She moved to sit beside him on the small love seat. I want to get there. Want to start building whatever comes next. I've spent too long looking backward. Eli, I want to look forward now. He pulled her against his side. Tell me what you see when you look forward. Clara May considered. I see a small house. Nothing fancy, but solid in ours. Windows that catch the morning sun. A kitchen garden out back, maybe chickens, though I've never kept chickens before. She paused. I see Sunday dinners and winter evenings by the fire. Work that means something. Neighbors who judge us by who we are, not who we were. And children, Eli asked quietly. Do you see children? She was quiet for a moment. I couldn't with Jake. He was too... She searched for words. Too unstable, too angry. I was grateful when no babies came. She looked up at Eli. But with you, yes, I see children. Little boys with your steady eyes. Little girls with your stubborn chin. Your smile, he countered. They should have your smile. We'll see, she said, suddenly shy. If we're blessed. We're already blessed. Eli said, everything else is just extra. Later, in the darkness of their wedding night, they came together with a sweetness that brought fresh tears to Clara May's eyes. This was what she'd dreamed of as a young girl. Not the passion, though that was there, but the tenderness. The feeling of being cherished, protected, desired not just as a body, but as a person. My wife, Eli murmured against her skin, as if testing the words. My beautiful, brave wife. My husband, she responded, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. They made love slowly, learning each other's rhythms, whispering promises and endearments that would have embarrassed them in daylight. and when exhaustion finally claimed them, they slept entwined. Clara May's ring catching the moonlight from the window. She woke once in the night to find Eli watching her, his expression soft in the darkness. "Can't sleep?" she asked drowsily. "Just thinking. About how I rode into Ash Hollow wanting nothing more than shelter from a storm, and how I'm riding out with everything I never knew I needed." She kissed him softly. "The storm brought you to me. I'll always be grateful for that rain. Even if it means a life of hard work, cold winters, no guarantee except that we'll face it together. Especially then." Clara May said, "I've had guarantees. Jake guaranteed me plenty. I'll take honest uncertainty over false promises any day." They left Fort Laramie 2 days later, properly supplied and legally wed. The ring on Clara May's finger caught the sun as she handled Buttercup's reins, and more than once she caught Eli smiling at the sight of it, as the fort faded behind them and the trail stretched ahead toward Montana. Clara May felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She was no longer the widow dancing alone in a saloon. She was Clara May Boone, wife and partner, riding toward a future she'd chosen for herself. And that, she thought as Eli began whistling a trail song, was worth every hard mile they'd traveled to get here. The attack came at dawn, 5 days out from Fort Laramie. Clara May woke to the sound of horses, too many horses, moving too fast. Eli was already up, Winchester in hand, his body tense as he scanned the lightening horizon. "Stay down," he whispered, but it was too late. 3 riders burst from the draw to their east, guns drawn and intentions clear. "Well, well," the lead rider called out. "Travelers with nice horses and full packs. Must be our lucky day, boys." Eli stepped forward, rifle steady. "Right on. We've got nothing worth dying for." The bandit laughed. "Maybe not, but you got things worth killing for. That's a fine black gelding. And the woman," his eyes found Clara May. "She'll fetch a good price in certain places." Clara May's blood turned to ice. She'd heard stories of women taken by outlaws, sold to brothels in mining camps where law was just a word. Her hand moved slowly toward the saddlebags where Eli had taught her to keep Jake's old colt. "Last warning," Eli said, his voice deadly calm. "Ride on. 3 against 1, mister. You ain't that good. He's not alone." Clara May stood, Jake's gun steady in her hands. The weapon felt heavier than she remembered, but her grip didn't waver. The bandits' horses shifted nervously. "Woman with a gun," one of them sneered. "Bet she don't even know which end—" Clara May fired. The shot took the man's hat clean off, close enough to part his hair. The sound echoed across the empty land like thunder. "I was aiming for the hat," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "Next one won't miss." For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then the leader made his choice, going for his gun. Eli's Winchester spoke first, the shot catching the man's center chest. He toppled from his saddle as his companions opened fire. Clara May dropped behind their piled saddles, bullets whining overhead. She heard Eli's rifle crack again, steady as a metronome. Her hands shook as she tried to reload Jake's Colt, fumbling with the cartridges. "Clara May, your left!" She spun to see the 3rd bandit trying to flank them. Without thinking, she raised the gun and fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The man jerked in his saddle, clutching his shoulder, and wheeled his horse around. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. One bandit lay still in the dust. Another was slumped over his horse's neck, riding hard for the horizon. The 3rd, the one who'd lost his hat, was already a dust cloud in the distance. Eli moved quickly to check the fallen man, then returned to Clara May. She still held the gun, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "You all right?" He gently took the weapon from her nerveless fingers. I shot a man." The reality of it hit her like a physical blow. "I shot him. You saved us." Eli pulled her against him, and she felt the rapid beat of his heart. "He was circling to get behind me. You saved us both. Is he—" "Wounded, not dead. He'll survive if he's smart enough to find a doctor." Eli pulled back to look at her face, You did what you had to do. No shame in that. But Clara May couldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the fight abandoned her all at once, leaving her weak and nauseated. She'd danced for rough men, lived with a gunfighter, thought herself hardened to violence. But pulling that trigger, watching a man's blood spray across his shirt, that was different. I used to beg Jake to teach me to shoot, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He always said no, said it wasn't fitting for a woman. After he died, I thought about throwing his gun away, but I kept it, just in case. A broken laugh escaped her. Just in case I needed to shoot someone. And now I have. Eli's hands were gentle as they framed her face. Listen to me. Those men would have killed me, taken you, sold you God knows where. You defended yourself, defended us. There's no sin in that. Then why do I feel so human? Because you are taking a life, even when justified, should never be easy. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But you're alive. We're both alive. That's what matters. They broke camp quickly, Eli wanting distance between them and any friends the bandits might have. Clara May rode in silence, replaying the fight over and over. The weight of the gun in her hands, the kick of the recoil, the look of shock on the wounded man's face. Stop it, Eli said after an hour of silence. Stop what? Torturing yourself. I can see it in your face. He guided his horse closer to hers. First time I killed a man. I threw up afterward, shook for hours, kept seeing his face every time I closed my eyes. When did it stop? Few weeks, but the memory never really goes away. Just gets quieter. He reached over to squeeze her hand. And before you ask, no, it doesn't get easier. Not if you're any kind of decent person. It just gets more familiar. They rode through the day, pushing harder than usual. As the sun began to sink, they found shelter in a grove of cottonwoods near a small stream. Eli tended the horses while Clara May built a fire, grateful for the familiar task to occupy her hands. I need to teach you properly, Eli said over their simple supper. To shoot, what you did today was brave, but you need training. Clara May nodded slowly. I thought knowing how to point and pull the trigger was enough. It's a start, but there's more to it. How to clean and maintain the weapon, how to shoot accurately under pressure, how to move, take cover, work with a partner. He paused. I should have started teaching you sooner. You couldn't have known. I knew we were traveling dangerous country. I knew there were men who'd see a woman as easy prey. His jaw tightened. I should have prepared you better. After supper, as the last light faded, Eli set up targets, empty cans balanced on rocks. He showed Clara May how to properly hold Jake's Colt, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. It's heavier than I remembered, she said after a few practice shots. Jake's was a .45, big gun for a small woman. We'll find you something more suitable in Montana, maybe a .38. He adjusted her stance. For now, use both hands. Like this. They practiced until full dark, the shots echoing across the empty land. By the end, Clara May could hit the cans more often than not, though her arms ached from the unfamiliar exercise. Better, Eli said. We'll practice more tomorrow. That night, despite her exhaustion, Clara May couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bandit's face, the spray of blood. She must have made some sound because Eli's arms came around her, pulling her back against his chest. Talk to me, he murmured. I keep thinking, what if I'd killed him? What if my aim had been a little different? Then he'd be dead, and it would still have been justified. But I'd have taken a life, ended everything he was or could have been. Eli was quiet for a moment. Do you think I'm a bad man? I've killed more than once. No, you're the best man I know. Then trust me when I say you're still a good woman. What happened today doesn't change who you are. It just shows how strong you are when tested. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I'm proud of you. Proud? I was terrified. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs doing despite the fear. His arms tightened around her. You stood with me when you could have hidden. You protected us both. That takes a kind of courage not everyone has. Gradually, surrounded by his warmth and steady presence, Clara May felt the tension drain from her body. The images were still there, would probably always be there, but they no longer held the same sharp-edged horror. Eli? She said into the darkness. Teach me everything, not just shooting. Everything I need to know to survive out here. You sure? It's not all pleasant learning. Neither is being helpless. She turned in his arms to face him. I don't ever want to be the woman men see as easy prey again. I want to be your partner, truly, and partners protect each other. He kissed her softly. All right, everything I know. I'll teach you, but I hope to God you never need most of it. So do I, but hoping and preparing are two different things. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between Ash Hollow and here, she said with a small smile. Must be the company I'm keeping. They resumed their journey the next morning, both watchful now in a way they hadn't been before. The attack had stripped away any illusion that their journey would be without danger. But as Clara May rode beside her husband, Jake's Colt now cleaned and loaded at her hip, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear, but confidence. She'd been tested by fire and hadn't broken. She'd stood beside Eli as a true partner, not a burden to be protected. The knowledge steadied her, gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Miles passed under their horses' hooves, carrying them closer to Montana and whatever future awaited them there, behind them. Somewhere in the vast Wyoming territory, a wounded outlaw would carry a scar and a story about the woman who shot him. But Clara May looked only forward now, toward the mountains rising like promises on the horizon. What are you thinking? Eli asked, noticing her distant expression. That I'm not the same woman who danced in that saloon, she said. I'm not sure who I am now, but I know I'm not her anymore. You're Clara May Boone, he said simply. My wife, my partner, the woman who stands beside me against whatever comes. That's all you need to be. She reached over to take his hand, their horses walking close together. That's everything I want to be. And as they rode on through the bright morning, Clara May felt the last of her old self fall away like an outgrown skin. In its place stood someone new, stronger, braver, tested by violence but not broken by it. A woman who could dance in saloons or shoot outlaws with equal skill. A woman who chose her own path. A woman who would never dance alone again. The Double Bar Ranch spread across a valley in southern Montana like a promise kept. When Eli and Clara May rode up to the main house on a crystalline April morning, they were trail-worn and weary, but alive with possibility. The mountains rose around them, still snow-capped but beginning to show green at their bases. Tom Hutchinson, the ranch owner, was a barrel-chested man in his 50s with honest eyes and work-worn hands. He looked them over with the careful assessment of someone who'd hired many drifters over the years. You the folks answered my advertisement in Fort Laramie? Yes, sir, Eli said. Eli and Clara May Boone. I've got experience with horses and cattle. My wife can cook, sew, tend house, whatever's needed. Hutchinson's eyes lingered on Clara May, taking in her trail clothes and the confident way she sat her horse. Ranch work ain't easy for a woman. Neither is traveling 700 miles through hostile territory. Clara May replied evenly, I imagine I'll manage. A smile tugged at Hutchinson's mouth. Reckon you might at that. Well, we're short-handed with spring roundup coming. Got a cabin sits empty near the eastern pasture. Roof's sound, but it'll need cleaning. Pays $30 a month for you. He nodded to Eli. And $15 for kitchen and household help. To Clara May. Food included? Fair? More than fair. Eli said. The cabin was small but sturdy, built of good pine logs with real glass windows. It sat on a rise overlooking a creek, with mountains painting the horizon in every direction. Clara May stood in the doorway, tears threatening. It's perfect, she whispered. It needed work, Dust thick on everything. Pack rats' nests in the corners. The stove rusted from disuse. But the bones were good, as they unloaded their few possessions. Clara May could already see it. Curtains at the windows, her mother's quilt on the bed, wildflowers in a jar on the table. They threw themselves into the work with desperate energy. Eli joined the other hands for 12-hour days, learning the rhythms of a working cattle ranch. Clara May scrubbed the cabin until her hands were raw, helped Cookie in the main house kitchen, mended clothes for the bachelor cowboys who paid extra for the service. 2 weeks into their new life, disaster struck. Lightning hit the main barn during a sudden storm, and flames erupted despite the rain. Every hand on the ranch rushed to fight it, forming bucket brigades, desperately trying to save the horses trapped inside. Eli plunged into the smoke-filled barn again and again, leading terrified animals to safety. Clara May worked the bucket line, her dress soaked and heavy, ash stinging her eyes, when part of the roof collapsed, trapping Hutchinson's prize mare. It was their combined effort, Eli holding up the burning beam while Clara May coaxed the horse out, that saved her. By dawn, the barn was gone, but no lives were lost, human or animal. Hutchinson surveyed the damage, his face grim but grateful. "You two probably saved my whole operation," he said to Eli and Clara May. "That mare's bloodline is half my breeding program." He studied them with new eyes. "Tell me, Boone, you ever think about something more permanent than hired handwork?" And so it began. Hutchinson, having no children of his own and impressed by their courage, offered them a partnership deal. Work the ranch for 5 years, and he'd deed them a section of land to start their own operation. It was more than they dared hope for. Summer brought long days and hard work, but also unexpected joy. Clara May learned to ride better than she'd ever imagined, helping with the cattle when needed. She started a kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the Montana soil. In the evenings, she and Eli would sit on their small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "Do you miss it?" Eli asked one evening. "The excitement, the towns." Clara May considered. "I miss music sometimes. And other women to talk to? But miss the life?" She shook her head. "Never. Not for a moment." As autumn turned the aspens to gold, Clara May realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She'd seen too many women die in childbirth, especially far from doctors. "We'll get through it," Eli promised, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Hutchinson's wife went through it 6 times. There's a midwife in town, and I'll ride for the doctor if needed. And if something happens to me, nothing will happen." His voice was fierce. "I won't let it." She smiled at his vehemence. "You can't control everything, Eli Boone. I can try." The winter was hard, but they were prepared. Their little cabin stayed warm, the woodpile high and dry. Clara May sewed baby clothes while snow piled against the windows. Eli carved a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth as silk. The other ranch hands, rough men all, surprised them with gifts. A rocking chair one had made, soft blankets, even a stuffed bear sewn by Cookie's arthritic hands. Spring came slowly to Montana, but when it arrived, it burst forth in glory. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the creek ran high with snowmelt. And on a bright May morning, with the midwife attending and Eli pacing outside like a caged wolf, Clara May gave birth to a daughter. "She's perfect," Clara May whispered, cradling the tiny bundle. "Look at her. Eli, we made this." They named her Hope, for that was what she represented. Hope for the future, for the family they were building, for the life they'd carved from wilderness and determination. As Clara May recovered, she would dance around the cabin with Hope in her arms, humming the old songs. But these weren't the mournful ballads of loss she'd sung in the saloon. These were lullabies of love and promise, songs of a woman who'd found her home. "Every beat of my heart is for you two," Eli said one evening, watching them. "You know that, don't you?" "We know," Clara May said, reaching for his hand. "Every lonely beat has found its match. The years would bring more children, 2 sons as steady as their father, and the ranch would grow." Eli and Clara May would earn their own land, build a larger house, become pillars of the growing community. But they would never forget those first days in the little cabin, when they were young and scared and brave all at once. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Clara May would stand on her porch and remember the woman she'd been, dancing alone in a dusty saloon. Sure, her life was over at 26. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. "What are you thinking?" Eli would ask, coming to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. "About how far we've come." She'd answer, "About the dance." "Still dancing?" "Always, just not alone anymore." And as the sun set behind the mountains, painting their valley in shades of gold and rose, Clara May Boone knew that every hard mile, every tear, every moment of fear had been worth it. She'd traveled from widow to wife, from dancer to rancher, from hopeless to hope's mother. The journey had been longer than miles could measure, but she'd arrived at last. Home, family, love. The dance continued, but now she had a partner for every step. And in the grand ballroom of the Montana sky, under stars that witnessed their love, Clara May and Eli danced on, together, always together, until the end of their days. Thank you so much for listening to this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. I hope Clara May and Eli's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know if you're gathered around your own campfire, driving down a lonesome highway, or cozied up at home. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, adventure, and romance from America's frontier days. And please, share your thoughts about Clara May and Eli's story. Did their love remind you that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us in the most unexpected places? Happy trails, partners, until we meet again around the campfire.